We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Chesam and Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 78b. This Amud is sponsored Le'iloi Nishmas Sima Bas Moshe David. Thank you for the sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or a Daf, please see the description box below and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. The Gemara continues with Rav Nachman's question to Rava. Rav Nachman asks Rava, Hai Kra, this pasuk, we're referring to the pasuk in Yechezkel. Again, the full pasuk is V'almono grusha lo yichu lehem lenoshim. It says they can't take almona and grusha. Ki im besulos mizera beis Yisrael, except for besulos, they can only take besulos from the children of Israel. V'almona asher ti almona mi kohen yikachu. And the widow who's a widow from a kohen, they can take. That's the pasuk in Yechezkel. And the question is as follows. Reisha b'kohen gadol, it sounds like the beginning of the pasuk is talking about a kohen gadol. V'seifa b'kohen hedyot, but then it sounds like the pasuk switches at the end and it's talking about a kohen hedyot. And Rashi explains, Hai Kra Reisha b'kohen gadol dechsiv almono grusha lo yikachu. It says that they can't take a widow and a divorcee. Ki im besulos, they can only marry besulos. V'hal lesel of a kohen gadol. Now that's only true by a kohen gadol. And Rashi continues, V'seifa b'kohen hedyot, but it sounds like the end of the pasuk is talking about a kohen hedyot. Why? To kamer besulos mizera beis Yisrael v'almona asher ti almona mi kohen yikachu. It seems to be saying that they're allowed to marry an almona. The kasal kadaydach, right now we think it means to say as follows. Dachi kamer means as follows. She almona mi miyuchas haroi lahasi lakuna. That if you have a widow from somebody who is fit, meaning to say they have the yichus that they're able to marry into the kahuna. Kidadarish le Rabbi Yehuda lakaman. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is going to say later on. Min hamesiyim lakuna. He's going to say it means from those who are able to marry the kohen. The almona shetei muteres lakohen lamashkachas la. Now an almona is not allowed to marry a kohen. Ela b'kohen hedyot, unless you're talking about a kohen hedyot. Not allowed to marry a kohen gadol. So you see that the end of the pasuk, which is talking about a kohen marrying an almana, must be talking about a regular kohen. Ve'echi mifsa kram emelan. How does the pasuk just switch? First you're talking about a kohen gadol, and then suddenly you're talking about a kohen hedyot. It doesn't make sense. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said to him, yes, that indeed the pasuk is switching from kohen gadol to kohen hedyot. The Gemara says, V'chasav krahachi, does the pasuk really write itself like that? Amar Lei said to him, yes, it does. Dichsiv, as it's written. We have another example of this. The pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Sefer Shmuel. Pasuk says, V'ner Elokim terem yichbe, u'Shmuel shoche beheichal Hashem. It says that Shmuel was lying in the heichal of Hashem. V'aloin yeshiva ba'azara el malchei beis David bilvad. And the Gemara asks, you're not allowed to sit in the Azara unless you're a king from the house of David HaMelech. Rather, you have to read it as follows: Elaner Elokim terem yichbe beheichal Hashem. You have to read the pasuk as Ner Elokim terem yichbe beheichal Hashem. That's going on the Ner Elokim. Ushmuel shoche b'mekomo. And Shmuel, he's just lying in his regular place. He, of course, is not going to be in the Azara. And Rashi explains, V'chasav krahachi, does the pasuk really write itself like that? Bitmi, it's a wonder. The lo parish be'behedya de v'gavra achrina boile shtuya. The pasuk's not going to tell you that now we're talking about a different individual. Now we're talking about the kohen hedyot. And Rashi continues, Shmuel shoche beheichal Hashem. Again, Shmuel's in the heichal Hashem. Chadam milsa mashma. It sounds like it's talking about, that's one statement. V'al karchach mefaskinole, but you have to be that we have to separate it out. Ushmuel shoche b'mekomo b'beis mishmar haLevim. It has to be that Shmuel was in his place in the area where the Levium stay. Shayu shom mesabayis. They would watch over the Beis Hamikdash. V'chein targum Yonasan be'ezras levoy. V'heichel aner kohen. The word heichel here is going on the candle. Shah menorah haisa be'heichel mishkan Shiloh. That the menorah was standing in the heichel of the mishkan Shiloh. And just like you have to divide up that pasuk, you divide up this pasuk as well. And the Gemara now analyzes the end of the pasuk. This is what Rashi alluded to before. The end of the pasuk said in Yechezkel almona asher tia almona mi kohen gadol yikachu. It says that the almona from a kohen gadol, that almona they're allowed to marry. Now, as we already said, this part of the pasuk is not talking about a kohen gadol. It's talking about a kohen hedyot. A kohen hedyot's allowed to marry any almona, not only the widow of a kohen. So what does it mean over here that if it's a widow of a kohen, then they can marry her? The Gemara asks, mi kohen in mi Yisrael lo. A kohen's allowed to marry a widow from a kohen, meaning if the husband of the almona was a kohen, and not if the husband of the almona was a Yisrael. That can't be. And so the Gemara instead says, Hachi Kamar, this is what the pasuk is saying. Mikohen yikachu mishar kohanim yikachu. What it means, Mikohen yikachu, it means from other kohanim. And Rashi here explains, Mishar kohanim yikachu means to say, Lifrushei asa de v'kohen hedyot koi. According to this understanding of the Gemara means to say, Mi kohen yikachu means Mishar kohanim yikachu, meaning regular kohanim, not a kohen gadol. Regular kohanim are allowed to marry an almana. V'achi kamar, this is what it's saying, V'almana asher tiya almana afilu mi Yisrael. If you have a widow, even if she's a widow, she was married to a Yisrael, Mishar kohanim she'eno kohen gadol yichu, or some other kohanim who are not kohen gadol, they can marry these almanas. That's the first approach, as we're going to see. Rabbi Yehuda is going to have a different approach that Rashi already alluded to. And that's what the Gemara brings now, Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa like this as well. Mikohen Yikachu, they take from the Kohen. It means Mishar Kohanim Yikachu. It means other Kohanim who are not Kohen Gadol, they can marry almonas, they can marry widows. And now we have Rabbi Yehuda's explanation. Rabbi Yehuda says, Min HaMesiyim LeKahuna Yikachu. What it means to say is if it's an almona from somebody where the lineage, where the yichus is that they can marry a Kohen, that's going to be okay. And Rashi explains, Min HaMesiyim LeKahuna, almonas Adam Sharoi Lahasi Bito LeKahuna Yikachu. What it means is, if it's the widow of a man, and that man's daughter would be able to marry a Kohen, then the widow as well can marry a Kohen. Lemu'ute almonas ger. What this is coming to exclude is, let's say, the widow of a ger, because the daughter of a ger cannot marry the Kohen, and so too the widow of the ger cannot marry the Kohen. Rabbi Yehuda l'taimin, Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. Da'amar le'el da'ayri Yechezkel asmachta bebas ger zocher. We said this earlier. He says that Yechezkel is talking, it's an asmachta talking about the daughter of a male ger. D'chsim mizera beis Yisrael kol zera b'hai kra'ori lan asmachta deposel isha bebiyaso. So that's the idea. Not only is that daughter of the ger zocher going to be disqualified, so too the woman that he marries, that almana, will be disqualified from the kahuna as well. And the Gemara continues and explains what Rashi just said. Rabbi Yehuda l'taimin, Rabbi Yehuda is following his opinion. Diamar bas ger zocher kebas cholol zocher. He says the daughter of a male convert is the same as the daughter of a male cholol. And the idea is, kol shatanose bito, if you're able to marry the individual's daughter, atanose almanusa, then you can marry his widow as well. V'chol she'i atanose bito, but if you're not allowed to marry his daughter, I atanose almanusa, then you're not allowed to marry his almana. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Av ger shenasa gioris. The same is going to be true for a ger that marries a gioris. Rabbi Yossi said in the Mishnah that if you have a ger that marries a gioris, the child of that ger and gioris is allowed to marry into the kuna. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Hamnuna mishmei de'ula. Rav Hamnuna says in the name of Ula, halachic Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. V'chein Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, and similarly Rabba bar bar Chana says halachic Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. And the Gemara continues, Umiyom shechara Beis Hamikdash, and from the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Na'agu Kohanim silsul biatzman. The Kohanim, they had a custom to treat themselves at a higher standard. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, they would follow the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that if both the father and the mother were converts, so that daughter would not be allowed to marry into the kuna, at least one of the parents had to be Jewish, like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said in the Mishnah. Amar of Nachman said, Amar li Huna said to me, Bali molech morim lo Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. If somebody comes to ask a shaila, we teach like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that one of the parents should be Jewish. Nasa ein motzia no samimenu Rabbi Yossi. However, let's say a person does marry, a Kohen does marry the daughter of a ger and a giores, so then we do not force them to divorce, we allow them to stay married. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ha'omer b'ni zeh mamzer eino nemun. If someone says, this son of mine is a mamzer, he is not believed. Ve'afilu shneihem modim, and even if both of them admit, meaning both the father and the mother, they admit, al ha'uber shebimaya, talking about the fetus that is in her womb, mamzer, they say it's a mamzer, einam ne'monim, they are not believed according to the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda omer ne'monim, Rabbi Yehuda says they are believed. Rashi says, Rabbi Yehuda omer ne'mon, areisha nami poling. He's arguing also on the reisha. In other words, if the father says that my son is a mamzer, said he's not believed, Rabbi Yehuda says the father would be believed. The Gemara yolaf time, and the Gemara will learn out the reason. And the Gemara says, Ma'va afilu shneim. What does it mean in the Mishnah when it says, even if both of them say the child is a mamzer? And the Gemara explains, Lomi boy kamer. What the Mishnah means is not only this, but even in this case. Lomi boy ihu de lo kimle. Not only the husband, he's really not sure about the situation. El afilu ihi de kimle. Even the mother who's more certain about what occurred, lo mehemna, she's not believed to say that the child is a mamzer. Velomi boy heichad de islei chazaka de kashrus. And not only in a situation where the child was already born and the statement is being made, there the child already has a chazaka that he is kosher, to lo mehemni, so in that case, of course, they're not believed. Ela afilu ubernami, but even if it's still a fetus in the womb, the lesle chazaka the kashrus, the baby hasn't been born yet, so there's no chazaka that it's kosher, but still lo mehemni, still they are not believed in that situation as well. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda omer ne'monim. Rabbi Yehuda said that the parents are believed to say that the child is a mamzer. They're believed in terms of the status of the child. And the Gemara says, Kedetanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Yakir. The pasuk says Yakir, and we understand that to mean Yakirenu la'acherim, that the father is able to identify the status of the child to others. Mikan amar Rabbi Yehuda. From here, Rabbi Yehuda says, Nemon adam lomar zebani bechor. A person is believed to say, this is my son, who is a bechor. Or cheshem shenemon adam lomar zebani bechor. And just like a person is believed to say, this is my son who is a bechor, kach nemon adam lomar zeh ben grusha v'zeh ben chalutza. So too a person is believed to say, this child of mine is a ben grusha or a ben chalutza. But the Chachamim say he's not believed. The person is not believed to identify the status of the child. And the Gemara now says, Amar le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak le Rava. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says to Rava, B'shalom le Rabbi Yehuda. I understand according to Rabbi Yehuda, Hainu dechsiv Yakir. That's why it's written in the pasuk Yakir. We learn out from Yakir that the parent is able to identify in terms of the status of the child. Elul Rabbanan, but according to the Rabbanan, Yakir Lamali. What do we need the pasuk of Yakir for? And the Gemara explains, B'tzarech HaKeira. We're talking about a situation, and Rashi says that this means to say it's a situation where we need to identify which child is a Bechor, meaning the father is able to say that this son of mine is the Bechor. Rashi explains, B'tzarech HaKeira, Krol leBechor hu da'asa. According to the Rabbanan, the pasuk is talking about Bechor. Uchegoin sheba mimedinas hayam. The case over here is let's say they're coming from far away. V'lo huchzak lanu beBechor. We have no idea who the Bechor is, El al pi aviv, except through the father. And that's exactly what the pasuk is talking about when it says Yakir. The father is able to identify who the Bechor is. And the Gemara says, if that's the case, Lamai Hilchasa, so for what practical halacha are we identifying the Bechor? Losses lo pishnayim, it's in order to give him the double portion of Bechor. But the Gemara says, Pshita, but that's obvious. You don't need a pasuk. Lama likra, why do we need a pasuk to say that the father can identify who the Bechor is? He has a migo that he's able to do that. Migo di boy meisvele matana milo yahavele. If he wanted to give all of his property to this son as a gift, couldn't he give it to him? In other words, the point is that the father has the ability, if he wants, to give all of his property to any one of the sons. He can do that as a matana. So of course he's able to say that this child of mine is the Bechor. And so the Gemara answers to that, we're talking about property that came after this point in time. He couldn't give that property as a gift, and that's why it's necessary from the pasuk to say that he has this power from the pasuk of Yakir. Rashi says, meaning after he said this kid is a Bechor, then other property came to him. So now again, he wants to say that he gets from this property the chelik of the Bechor, the portion of the Bechor. For this, if not for the pasuk, lek amigo, you don't have amigo. He can't give that property now. He doesn't have that property yet. A person can't give away something that doesn't yet exist. But now, if we're believing that he's really the Bechor, so he is going to get the double portion of that property, and he's going to get that as part of the inheritance, and so that's what we need the pasuk for. But the Gemara continues with Rabbi Meir. But what about according to Rabbi Meir? The Amar the Machne Davar Shalo Bali Olam. Rabbi Meir says that a person is able to be Machne something that doesn't yet exist. So you still don't need the pasuk. He could even give him items that he doesn't yet have. Yakir Lamali. So according to Rabbi Meir, what do we need the pasuk of Yakir for? And the Gemara says to that, Shenaflu Lo Kashu Goses. We're talking about a situation of property that came to him when he was a Goses, when he was already on his deathbed. And Rashi explains, Kishu Goses, when he's a Goses, La'achar Sheheyed Kach, meaning after he testified that this is my Bechor, Ahani Leishim Yiplu Lo Nechosim Kishu Goses. Let's say now after that point in time, the father becomes a Goses, and he gets property while he's a Goses, Sheitol Zebahen Chelik Bechor. So now that he's identified the Bechor will be able to get the double portion from that property. V'lav dehemne kra la'av, and if not for the fact that the pasuk trusted the father lahakira to identify him as the Bechor, mishum migo lo zachaben, the migo wouldn't work over here because he wouldn't be able to give from that property. The moder Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir admits, ba'omer nechasim sheyavo li kasheye goses. Let's say a person says the property that comes to me when I will be a goses, nesunim lach, they're going to be given to you. Even Rabbi Meir, who says adam makna davar shelo bali olam, it's not going to work. Shelo amar klum, that's not going to work at all. Ho'elu v'shah sheboim liolam labar matanu, because here at the time that it's coming into his possession, he's not able to even give a matana because of the fact that he has the status of a goses. And Rashi continues, Ulahachi nakad kishu goses. Now the reason why we're talking about when he's a goses, v'lo nakad lachar misa, why don't we say property that comes to him after his death? That should be the same thing, but we can't say that. Dahanu afilu b'toras bechor lo mahani le dibure, because over there, even if the kid is a bechor, he's not able to get a double portion from anything that comes after death. Let's say property that was owed, debts that are collected later on. Deina bechor notel b'roi kevemuchsa, because the halach is a bechor does not get a double portion by roi like by muchsak, meaning only by property that's actually in the possession of the the father at the time of the father's death, so that the Bechor gets a double portion. But stuff that is fit to come to the father but only arrives after death, that is not going to count. V'hainu roy, and this would be a situation of roy, because we're talking about, again, if you're talking about property that he gets after his death, he wasn't yet muchsuk at that point. It's property that was fit to come to him. The pasuk says b'chol asher yimatzeh lo, so that's why we can't be talking about la'achar misa, but we could be talking about goses in a situation of property that comes to him when he's a goses again, so that he wouldn't be able to give as a matana, but the child would be able to get the double portion if he's identified as a bechor, even from among that property. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Misha Nasan Rishus L'Shlucho L'Kadesh Esbidu. If somebody gives permission to his messenger, to his agent, to be Mekadesh, his daughter, to give away his daughter in Kiddushin, V'halachu V'kitcha, but then the father goes ahead and he gives her away in Kiddushin instead. So the Mishnah says, Im Shalo Kidmu Kiddush of Kiddushin. If his Kiddushin came first, the father's, then the father's Kiddushin is the good Kiddushin. Im Shal Shalucho Kidmu, but if the agent's Kiddushin came first, Kiddush of Kiddushin, then it's his Kiddushin, that's a good Kiddushin. V'meino Yadu, and if it's not known, and Rashi explains him shalo kidmu kiddush of kiddushin the batlei l'shlichusei the shliach. If his kiddushin came first, he's essentially nullified the shlichus of the shliach. V'meino yadua ein yadua eza kadem. If we don't know which one came first, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Tes Amud Aleph.